Hey Optimancers, Chris here. For the past several weeks I've been going over the subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of everything. And for the most part, I've been quite happy with what's available. Lots of subclasses I want to try, and that should be effective, and not break my DM's campaign. And then we get to Clerics. So, are these Cleric subclasses powerful? Oh yeah. Are these Cleric subclasses too powerful? Oh yeah. Will they wreck your campaign? They very possibly could. Today I'm going to be going over both the subclasses for Cleric in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the subclass of the Twilight Cleric and the subclass of the Peace Cleric. And I'm going to explain why I think there are some reasons to have significant hesitation before you allow them at all, and what I think might fix that. If you would like to support what I do with these videos, I'll be linking a Patreon page in the video description. Patrons are provided early access to ad-free versions of these videos, and my top-level patrons join me for a casual one-shot D&D session each month. So let's get started. Okay, so before we get into the subclasses for Clerics, I'm going to go through the optional class features made available in Tasha's for Clerics. First, we have the additional Cleric spells. This is a smaller list, and there's nothing here until level 3. There's some pretty good spells on this list though. Aura Vitality might be the best healing spell up to its level, and it's going to pair nicely with something like a Life Cleric, but it's a decent spell for any Cleric. Summon Celestial is one of the better new summoning spells in Tasha's. Sunbeam and Sunburst, I think, pretty obviously should have been on the Cleric spell list. Power Word Heal is a trap. Stick with Mass Heal. So, not a big list, but it's okay. At second level, we're going to get Harness Divine Power. This allows us to switch out a Channel Divinity for a spell slot. So this will scale with your level. In fact, it scales in two ways. So at second level, you will be able to recover one spell per long rest, but eventually you'll be able to spend up to 3 Channel Divinities for third level spells. So you'll eventually get not only more spells, but higher level spells. I think this is particularly nice for the subclasses that have more circumstantial Channel Divinities. So you're always going to be able to use them in some way rather than just having them go to waste. Then at fourth level, we're going to get Cantrip Versatility. Now, all the cantrip casting classes get the ability to switch out cantrips with a similar feature, and the clerical cantrip list is not that big, so I don't think they're going to get as much use from it as some other classes are, but I still think it's a good feature to have. Then at 8th level, we get Blessed Strikes. This is one of those features that replaces an existing feature. In this case, it replaces either Divine Strike or Potent Spellcasting. And in either case, I think this one is a good trade, unless you are 100% dedicated to doing one or the other. Even then, unless you already have a reliable damage type, I still think this is the way to go. So I guess if you're a light cleric, or sitting on a 20 wisdom score, and you never use a weapon, then keep Potent Spellcasting. But in almost every other case, I would make this switch. You miss out on the damage scaling of Divine Strike at 14th level, but for the most part, the added versatility here should make up for that, especially before you get to 14th level. So that's it for the optional class features. It's not a big list. Personally, I would allow all of these optional class features. They had some decent things, though none of them is all that amazing, to be honest. But now, let's talk about the 2 craziest subclasses in Tasha's. We'll start with the Twilight Cleric. So Twilight Clerics guard against the horrors of the night. In fact, they kind of turn these horrors into jokes. Every ability this subclass gets is good, and several of them are off the charts and completely unprecedented. First, let's look at the domain spells we get. Remember that domains have pretty circumstantial or lackluster domain spell lists normally. Not Twilight, of course. On here we have Fairy Fire and Sleep at first level, Lehman's Tiny Hut and Circle of Power. Lots of spells here you're going to cast. Honestly, it's one of the best domain spell lists there is. Then we're going to get proficiency in heavy armor and martial weapons, because of course we do. Then there's permanent advantage on initiative. Barbarians have to invest 7 levels before they get this. We're going to get it at level 1, except we have the added flexibility of handing it out to someone else if we want. Okay, so our first level Twilight Cleric has advantage on initiative. Sleep, which is the best control spell in the game at this level, normally not available to clerics. Heavy armor, martial weapons, sound fantastic. Well, you get more. Also, at first level, you can have a 300-foot dark vision range. I honestly thought, the first time I read this, that this was a typo. Drow, Drugar, Deep Gnomes, they get superior dark vision. That's 120 feet. Heck, Beholders get 120-foot dark vision, and they're literally made of eyes. So let's give you even more. Lots more. And you can hand out the superior dark vision to your allies, too. Why not 3 or more of them for an hour? And you can do it again if you spend a spell slot. And this is all at level 1. And we are just getting started with this subclass. So then we get to level 2 and the Twilight Cleric starts to get good. We get our channel divinity called Twilight Sanctuary. This requires our action and provides temporary hit points to all allies in 30 feet. These temporary hit points equal d6 plus your cleric level, and it dispels a charm or frightened effect. Sound amazing? Well, it's better than that. You get the benefits too. Sound amazing? Well, it's better than that. Loads better than that. You get these benefits at the end of your turn, then your allies get the benefits at the end of their turn, and then we do it all over again for the next 9 rounds in a row. So at 6th level, use this and you hand out an average of 10 temporary hit points to every member of the party every round. This becomes 15 on average at level 11, 20 on average at 16, 24 on average at level 20. If we're talking about maybe 4 other party members, plus a familiar and a steel defender, because they're going to get this benefit too, and maybe there's a summoned creature and it's going to get this benefit too. A 5th level Twilight Cleric is handing out, 60 plus temporary hit points on round 1, and up to that amount every single round this continues, up to a minute. This isn't requiring concentration, by the way, and in addition, every charm ends, every fear effect ends, as well as handing out what could potentially be several hundred temporary hit points. The party is going to be eating area of effect damage for breakfast, and takes on hordes of enemies with minimal damage. Oh, and remember, Channel Divinity doesn't just come back every short rest, but it scales with level. So in a lot of campaigns, I would expect to be able to do this in every single battle in the typical adventuring day by level 6. So yeah, this ability is strong, and way beyond what we see for other clerics with their channel divinities. I mean, it's not even close. Just for an example to compare, a Death Domain cleric can deliver 15 points of extra damage once. So it's more than it not being close. It's like comparing a high-level spell to a cantrip. It kind of sounds insane to me, but you know what? We're not done. Okay, so now we get to 6th level. How about concentration-free flight equal to your walking speed when you're in dim light or darkness for a bonus action? We'll throw in multiple uses. We'll start with 3, go to 6, each lasting a minute. And I have to say, this one is good, but hooray! This is not broken. It's just a strong ability for the level, but in line with some of the better 6th level abilities we see. If the entire subclass was built this way, we would have a strong subclass, not a broken one. So at 8th level we get Divine Strike. Interestingly, they did not make it 10d8 per strike. They just did the standard, d8 to 2d8 by 14th level. Weird, right? Then at 17th level, we can use our broken Twilight Sanctuary, which remember has already been scaling every level, which we're probably having up in every combat, and now we're just going to give a blanket plus 2 armor class to the entire party. And so that is the Twilight Cleric, and I read this, and my jaw dropped. I mean, what happened? Normally they put out Unearthed Arcana, and then they scale it back before initial release.
We often, and this is not only true for this Unearthed Arcana, but also for our subclasses, we will often put things out that are more potent than we would end up publishing. I've mentioned before, it is actually far easier for us to produce something that is more powerful than we want, and then, but see, do people like the concept? Yeah. And simply rein in the power.
So I checked out the Unearthed Arcana version, and I have to tell you, the Unearthed Arcana Twilight Sanctuary ability does not scale. It's a D8 temps, and that's it. So they actually bumped this up before official release, and the Twilight Cleric Unearthed Arcana version was already good. So this is kind of unreal. Still, there's even a crazier ability they gave to Clerics and Tashas, and that brings us to the other subclass, the Peace domain. The craziest part of all of this is these two subclasses work together and break the game. And that's why I'm going over both of them in this video. So the Peace Domain Cleric is a cleric that brings people together in peace, but let's face it, most Peace Domain Clerics are going to go butcher some monsters. At first level, we're going to get our domain spells. There's lots of great spells here. Sanctuary, Aid, Sending, Resilient Sphere, Rary's Telepathic Bond. Again, this is better than the average list, though most of the best spells here are already available to clerics. Additionally, we're going to get two more abilities at first level. The first is a bonus proficiency in Insight, Performance, or Persuasion. This is thematically appropriate and not bad at all. Then we get Emboldening Bond. This one is really, really good. Choose some creatures. This can include yourself, and it starts at 2, but it scales to 6. For the next 10 minutes, these creatures get a d4 they can spend to increase an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. Presumably, this is after the roll is made, but before the results are determined, though technically it doesn't say that. It doesn't tell us when this is applied. But this ability is very, very good. It starts out probably as good as a concentration-free bless spell with 10 times the duration, and it eventually becomes 3 times better than that. So, hey, why don't we make it usable multiple times per day? Twice at first level, up to 6 times per day at 17th level. Oh, and by the way, this doesn't even require the cleric to not be incapacitated or anything. Once it's up for 10 minutes. The only restriction is that any creature affected by this must be within 30 feet of any other creature affected by this. Not within 30 feet of the cleric, by the way. This is pretty much, as far as I'm concerned, a non-restriction. Oh, and yes, this will stack with Bless, so you can add 2d4 to your attack roll or your save if needed. So I wondered, is this an ability like with the Twilight Cleric where this isn't tested in Unearthed Arcana, and this one was in Unearthed Arcana in a different form. In Unearthed Arcana, this would work on 2 creatures, and it could be done once per day. If you want to do it more than once per day, it would require a spell slot. That isn't the case anymore. Now you can do it multiple times per day with no spell slot, and you can do more than 2 creatures. And that addition of additional creatures is a pretty big deal, actually, because we're talking about doubling or even tripling the effect of this. So this is a really, really good ability, though I don't think we're breaking the game yet. At second level, we get our Channel Divinity, which lets us move without provoking opportunity attacks equal to our speed. This doesn't use our regular movement, so we can move again before or after, and we can heal someone, 2d6 plus our Wisdom modifier, to any creature we move within 5 feet of during this extra movement. So this is a very solid Channel Divinity. Even if it's one ally, that's not bad, 10-ish hit points healing, but we can hit multiple allies with this, and then it's a pretty strong healing ability for second level. We could also use this out of combat to heal the entire party. And unlike the life domain, there's no limit on the maximum number of hit points that a creature can have to benefit from this. We can give it to who we need to. Overall, I would say this is a better Channel Divinity than the life clerics at healing. But again, this is a good Channel Divinity, but I don't think it's broken. And it really doesn't scale beyond our Wisdom increasing for an extra point of healing or 2. So I think this is a good Channel Divinity, but I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. Then we get to 6th level, and we get the ability that I think breaks this subclass and breaks it hard. So our emboldening bond feature, which is already really good and has already scaled to 3 creatures and 3 times per day, so it should be covering most of our party most of the time, gets an ability that is going to be crazy at the table. Remember, as I go over this feature, this will eventually cover our entire party, likely in every combat. So what happens is, anytime a creature in the bond takes damage, another creature in the bond can use their reaction to teleport within 5 feet of the first creature and take that damage instead. So technically there is a range limit of 30 feet, though remember that this is just a range limit between the creature that took the damage and the creature that's going to take the damage instead. So let's start with this being a reaction teleport usable up to every round by everyone bonded. That alone can create a tactical advantage. There are abuses here too, as that creature doesn't need to see you, so technically we could use it as a way to get the party through walls, out of force cages, out of other harmful effects, etc. But there's much more going on here. So you just got breathed on by a green dragon. Ouch, that is a lot of damage. Except Bob the Yuan-Ti uses the reaction, and now nobody takes damage. Or you got fireballed. Ouch, that's a lot of damage, but Greg the Tiefling over there uses their reaction, and that damage is halved. Now you got hit by a giant. Ouch, that's a lot of damage, except Jane the Raging Barbarian teleports and takes half the damage instead. Tanking is now built into every single party, and in every single case, the party member best able to take that damage can just do so. Enemy tactics are shattered, because this pretty much makes it impossible for enemies to concentrate damage on a party member. Your hit points are now a pool of hit points, and until it drops to near 0, everybody gets to stay up. And that brings us to the really insane part. Just imagine, that one of the allies in the bond is a Twilight Cleric with Twilight Sanctuary up. This is the point where this ability goes from really, really amazing to just game breaking. Imagine, if you will, a 9th level party of 4 where everyone is in the bond. One of those 4 is a Twilight Cleric and one is a Peace Cleric. So the Twilight Cleric is throwing out around 50 temporary hit points each round, and an enemy has to get through all those 50 before delivering any damage, and on the next round we start over again. So if that creature is doing less than 50 points of damage a round, they're not doing any damage at all. Or if you have 10 creatures, each delivering about 5 points of damage a round, not delivering damage at all. And it doesn't matter if they concentrate their attacks, it doesn't matter if they spread out their attacks, in all cases it's going to be negated. In a 10-round combat, we could be negating over 500 hit points of damage entirely. It doesn't matter if creatures concentrate attacks, spread them out, these kind of tactics are irrelevant. However, if anyone in the party can post resistance or immunity to this damage, it becomes even more broken, though honestly, at this point it really probably doesn't matter. So just to relate a personal story, I basically was going to start this campaign. This is about a month ago. I announced it to a select group of players. Now, I hadn't said anything about character creation yet or character creation guidelines, but just right away I had a player come forward and tell the group that they wanted to play a Twilight Cleric and their friend wanted to play a Peace Cleric. And I told them, okay, I know the interaction you're going for. You're thinking you're going to be teleporting all the players in and they're going to be using temporary hit points to take all the enemy damage. And they said, yeah, that's what we want to do. That sounds like fun. Would that be okay? And I said, well, I guess, I could ramp up challenges. If I go through each challenge in the campaign and make them harder, we could probably work that out. And then I started doing the planning, and I started looking at scenarios, and I started running numbers, and I realized that this was almost an impossible task for me as a dungeon master. I was going to end up in a situation where either the combats were going to be deadly, or no challenge at all, or one or the other, and I had no idea which one. And so I think this is something that as players we sometimes miss when we see these combinations that look so amazing. And that is that if we're doing like a one-shot game, you play something like this and all the challenges are super easy, well, whatever, we had fun. But in an extended campaign, it's actually fun to have challenging but not deadly encounters. So as a DM, I try to provide those. But with the Peace domain and the Twilight domain as written, I found that that was going to be basically impossible. And so as a player, I think you look at these abilities and you say, that sounds like a lot of fun. But I think if you do an extended campaign and you find that the challenges are all not challenging, or you're constantly replacing party members who died because the DM overtuned things, and that, like I said, is so easy to do. It's almost imperceptible between a non-challenging encounter and a deadly encounter. In fact, I think in a lot of cases it might even be the same thing, depending on how the combat goes. I think that an extended campaign is going to just kill your campaign. You're going to end up with players who are not challenged or their party is dying, and neither of those things are good for an extended campaign. So as I said, I think as players we sometimes are drawn to these, think they're going to be fun, and they might be fun for a session or two, but in an extended campaign I think we're actually sabotaging our own fun by going after classes like this, and that's why I don't recommend them. Because yes, I like effective characters. I talk about it all the time. This channel is largely dedicated to making effective characters, but none of the characters that I recommend are going to have this effect on your campaign. Again, I wondered how on earth did this not become apparent from the Unearthed Arcana feedback? So I took a look. So for the Peace Cleric, the 6th level ability in Unearthed Arcana allowed you to use your reaction to give another creature resistance to the damage that they're taking that round. And this is only within a protective bond that included a total of 2 creatures, not the proficiency bonus number of creatures that it does now. And there's no teleport, there's no switching the damage between the party members that you choose when you're attacked. All the crazy stuff that's in there now wasn't in the Unearthed Arcana at all. So they threw that out and threw this in. So this ability, once again, got thrown onto the official version without feedback, and again, presumably without playtesting at all. So this makes me wonder, what's the point of having Unearthed Arcana at all? I would love to know what happened, to be a fly on the wall and find out how the designers thought throwing an ability like this, along with an ability like Twilight Sanctuary, in the same publication, by the way, wouldn't cause any problems. I can only imagine they were facing maybe a deadline and rushed it through or something. I don't know. When these subclasses were released, players instantly recognized these subclasses didn't line up. So how did the designers miss it? So for the rest of the subclass, we get potent spellcasting at level 8, and then at level 17 we'll be able to automatically apply resistance to any damage taken using Protective Bond, again, if that matters. Beyond 6th level, this subclass doesn't have anything that concerns me, but the 6th level ability, just I don't know how you keep it. So I can't really get my head around these 2 subclasses. Clerics from a mechanical perspective have always been one of the better classes, arguably the best class at the single-digit levels, and the subclasses have always been fairly well balanced against each other, despite being relatively distinct. I did a video on Cleric subclasses where I concluded at the end that the gap between the weakest and the strongest Cleric subclasses was actually quite narrow. But not anymore, at least if either of these subclasses are allowed in your campaign. If they are, and they get used, I think your campaign will be very challenging for you to run. Now, what if somebody has their heart set on one of these subclasses? Well, in both cases, I think you are way better to go back to Unearthed Arcana and just use those versions. Even though those versions are relatively strong, Unearthed Arcana usually is stronger than published content, they're not going to destroy your campaign as these ones were. I mean, if I read these side by side, I would assume these were the playtest, And then through the playtest, they determined which abilities they absolutely couldn't have and then got rid of them for the official. But it's the reverse. They had an unofficial that was strong but wasn't going to destroy your game, and then they threw out some of those abilities and replaced them with ones that would. Now, there will be those who say, remember, Tasha's is all optional stuff, and you can just not use these. And I won't. But unlike before Tasha's, now I get to be the bad guy that's not letting the players have a full selection of subclasses from the official source material. So with these two subclasses, I have to say, I wish they didn't exist at all. But if you're a DM, my recommendation is not to use them or use the unearthed arcana versions. This isn't a recommendation I'll make for anything else in Tasha's, and for the most part, I still think this is a good book, but something went wrong here. Very wrong. So I feel like I need to move on from this to something I am a fan of in Tasha's. So in my next video, I'll be looking at the feats, which overall I think are well done and offer some great new options. So until then, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you soon.